Hello, welcome to week 7, chapter 7, Inference for Distribution. In this chapter, we will learn about the inference for the mean of a population, comparing two means, and other topics in comparing distribution. First part is inference for the mean of a population. We will cover all these points one by one. So first is what is t-distribution? So when the sampling distribution of x bar is close to normal, we can find probabilities involving x bar by standardizing. That is, z is equal to x bar minus mu divided by sigma by root n. But now here we have seen earlier that for the sampling distribution of x bar, we have standard deviation of sigma by root n, whereas these are the values of x bar. After standardizing, we got sigma is equal to 1 and mu is equal to 0. When we don't know sigma, in earlier chapter when we were learning, it was the assumption that we know the value of sigma. Here the condition is different. Here it's saying we don't know sigma. That is the standard deviation of the population. So we can estimate it using the sample standard deviation, and for that we call standard deviation of the sample as Sx. And what happens when we standardize this value? So it would be x bar minus mu divided by Sx by root n. This new statistics does not have a normal distribution, and this formula is for the t-distribution. So when we standardize based on the sample standard deviation, our statistics has a new distribution that is called as t-distribution. T-distribution has a shape similar to that of standard normal curve in that it is symmetric with a single peak at 0. However, it differs from the normal curve in that it has more area in the tails. So here we can see, as in the Z, the tail is kind of very lean, whereas in the T distribution we can see that tails are different from the normal curve. We can also compare the formula. There is only one difference, that is, here we have the value Sx and here it is sigma. So like any standardized statistic, t tells us how far x bar is from its mean mu in standard deviation units. However, there is a different t distribution for each sample size, is specified by its degree of freedom. So when we perform inference about a population mean mu using a t distribution, the appropriate degrees of freedom are found by subtracting 1 from the sample size n. That makes a formula for degree of freedom is equal to n minus 1. N is the total number of sample. So the t-distribution degree of freedom, we can say that draw an SRS of size n from a large population that is a normal distribution with mean mu and a standard deviation sigma. The one sample t statistics is t is equal to x bar minus mu divided by Sx by root n. And this has a t-distribution with degrees of freedom, which is represented as df is equal to n minus 1. So the t-distribution was discovered in 1908 by William S. Gossett, and he was a statistician employed by Guinness Brewing Company, which prohibited its employees from publishing their discoveries that were brewing related. In this case, the company let him publish under the pen name Student, using an example that did not involve brewing. The tea distribution is often called Student's tea in his honor. And the second thing I want to explain is, here we are learning about the standard error. When the standard deviation statistic is estimated from the data, the result is called standard error of the statistics. And the standard error of the sample mean is S divided by root n. The standard of the sample mean is represented by SE x bar. So this is the formula for the standard error. Third point is, for a one sample t-test, 1 degree of freedom is spent estimating the mean, and the remaining n minus 1 degree of freedom estimates variability. What does this mean? Why we are subtracting only 1, not 2? So we can take one example. Suppose you want to test the population mean with a sample of 5 values using t-test, and you have a now constraint. So by definition, the sum of all values in data must be equal to n multiplied by mean, where n is the number of values in the data. So if, for example, you have 5 numbers, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What would be its sum? It would be 15. And what its mean? It would be 3. 15 divided by 5. So, and there are 5 total number of values are there. So n into mean is 15. So sum is should be equal to n into mean. So if you want to change the first value, that is, if you want to change the 1 to 0.1, 2 to 0.2, 3 to 0.3, or 4 to 0.4. But for the last number, you have to get that number which should be equal to 15. That would make all the numbers calculated, and addition should be 15. So you have a particular constraint on, but you cannot change the last number. So what would you say? You have the degree of freedom to change the first, second, third, fourth. So what would be the degree of freedom for this? It would be 5 minus 1, 4, because you can change the 4 values, but the last value you cannot change. So when comparing the density curves of the standard normal distribution, t distribution, several facts are apparent. Here we can see that red in dashes is the t distribution 2 degrees of freedom. Green one is t distribution with 9 degrees of freedom, whereas maroon colored is a standard normal distribution. And here we can see its tail. You can see here particularly that standard normal distribution tail is very lean, whereas the other t distributions are having bigger tails, or we can say fat tails. But you can see as the degree of freedoms are increasing, degrees of freedom are increasing, it means the number of samples is increasing. You can say in other sense, it's getting to the almost like standard normal distribution. So the density curves of the t distribution similar in shape to the standard normal curve. The spread of t distribution is a bit larger than that of the standard normal distribution. As we can see here, it's from here to here, although it's comparable because we are comparing it with the standard normal, but we can see its spread is somewhat larger than the normal distribution. And the t distributions have more probability in the tails and less in the center, does the standard normal. As the degree of freedom increases, the t density curve becomes even closer to the standard normal curve. So we can use table D in the back of the book to determine critical values T star for t distribution with different degrees of freedom. I will also attach this copy in your Blackboard for the week 8, so you can learn from that. Also, I want to say that it's saying here the t distribution have more probability in the tails and less in the center than does the standard normal distribution. Why? Because if we are going to take it here, the distribution for here, this area is less when we compare it with the in both of these cases, because its area would be larger than the normal curve. Here we can see that. So is a one sample t confidence interval, and the one sample t interval for a population mean is similar in both reasoning and computational detail to the one sample z interval for the population mean. We learned about this in the earlier chapter, and here we can see that we are going to choose an SRS of size n from a population having unknown mean mu. A level C confidence interval for mu is x bar plus minus t critical, that is multiplied by Sx, that is the standard deviation of the sample, divided by root n. And where t critical is the critical value for the t n minus 1 distribution. N minus 1 is the degree of freedom. And the margin of error, as we have learned earlier, that this formula is for the margin of error. So it is t critical multiplied by Sx divided by root n. So this interval is exact when the population distribution is normal and approximately correct for large n in other cases. So finding t critical in t table, here we will learn how we can use table C. Earlier we have seen it in older books, it's table D. So formula we have earlier seen, x bar plus minus t critical multiplied by Sx divided by root n. And suppose we have confidence level 95% and n is equal to 9. So degree of freedom would be 8. So for that we can use, for this particular condition, confidence level at 95% and degree of freedom 8. And the critical value is 2.306. Here we can also see it's also showing the z critical values in the last row, and there are different values, one-sided probability and two-sided probability. So here are those values. So here's an example. There's some company states the adult age 18 to 24 years old average 18.5 hours per week watching traditional television. Does this average seems reasonable for college students? We drew an SRS of 8 college students and obtained the following data in hours of TV watched per week. So it's 3, 16.5, 10.5, 40.5, and similarly you can see. So the mean is 14.5 hours and standard deviation is 14.85 hours. And we want to estimate the true mean hours of television watched per week mu for all college students with a 95% confidence level. So for the one sample t confidence interval, if the conditions are met, we can use a one sample t interval to estimate mu. It should be random. So we are told that the data come from random sample of 8 college students from the population of all college students. It's normal because the sample size is small, that is n is smaller than 30. We must check whether it is reasonable to believe that the population distribution is normal. Examine the distribution of the sample data. Here we have seen the distribution of the sample data that looks somewhat like this. With no extreme outliers, this graph suggests no severe departure from normality. And independent. Because we are sampling without replacement, we must assume that the population is much larger than the sample. It is obvious that there are many thousands of college students in the population. So we already calculated the mean and standard deviation of the students, and because n is equal to 8, we have the t distribution with degree of freedom is equal to 7 to find the critical value. So here we can see the values. So from the table we find t critical is equal to 2.365 for the degree of freedom 7 and for 95% confidence interval we got the value 2.365, and therefore 95% confidence interval for mu is x bar plus minus t critical into Sx by root n. We will keep all the values in this formula, and we are going to get these values, that is it would range from 2.08 to 26.92. So we are 95% confident that the interval from 2.08 to 26.92 hours capture the true mean time spent watching television by college students. So here is the one sample t-test, and for it choose an SRS of size n from a large population that contains an unknown mean mu. So the test hypothesis for one sample t-test is equal to mu, because we are just going to take one population, so it is known as one sample t-test. And for a particular mu, that is the population mean, we have a value that is equal to any value that one have, and we compute the one sample t statistics by this formula that we have seen earlier, that is x bar minus mu naught divided by Sx by root n, that is the standard error. Find the p-value by calculating the probability at degrees of freedom is equal to n minus 1 of getting a t-statistics this large or larger in the direction specified by the alternate hypothesis. So we earlier learned about the null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. So there can be three options for alternate hypothesis, that mean is greater than mu naught, that is the value we have for the population mean. Other can be, it could be smaller, or it can go either direction. So we say that it is not equal to that particular value. So here we can see when we say larger, then it would be positive tail, and here it's the t, and if it's smaller it would be negative, so it would be in the left tail. Whereas when we say that it's not equal to, so we can see here two-sided, or we can say two-tailed test is there. So we have the values minus mod t and t, mod t. So these p-values are exact if the population distribution is normal and are approximately correct for large n in other cases. As an example, for one sample t-test, recall for the earlier television watching example, and we reported an average of 18.5 hours for 18 to 24 years olds. We want to test whether the average time that college students watch television differs from the reported value of 18.5. So we want to perform a test at the alpha is equal to 0.05 significance level of null hypothesis is mu is equal to 18.5, whereas alternate is mu is not equal to 18.5. So this is two-sided, so it is two-tailed test, and where mu is the actual mean hours of television watched by college students. So earlier we checked that a condition for inference were satisfied, so we can proceed to the t-test. So here is an example. We already have the values for the sample mean and standard deviation, that is 14.5 and 14.854 respectively. And here we will see we will put all these values in our formula, and we will get the test statistics t, and its value is minus 0.762. So the p-value is twice the area to the left of t, that is equal to minus 0.76 under the t distribution curve with degree of freedom 8 minus 1, 1 that would be equal to 7. So for the 7, when we will check my 0.762, it would lie in between these two values, that is 0.711 and 0.896. Here we can see that. So the p-value, because this is two-tailed, and we have already seen in our last chapter that when this is a condition, we can double the p-value. So it would be 2 into 0.20, that would be equal to 0.40, and 2 into 0.25. Why we are doing 0.20? Because the probability of 0.896, because our t statistics lie in between, so here is the probability. So we are going to take mine for 0.20 and 0.25, and we will double it, and because this is greater than our alpha, so that is 0.05 significance level, we fail to reject null hypothesis. We don't have enough evidence to conclude that the mean our college students watch television differs from the Nielsen value of 18.5. And because we decided not to reject null hypothesis, we might have made a type 2 error, and you already learned about the type 2 error and type 1 error in last chapter. So if we did, then the mean hour of television watched by college students is actually not 18.5 hours, even though we did not detect that with our significance test. So here's the general outline for a one sample t-test. First step is state the problem. Second is plan. We recognize need for a test on mu using a one sample t procedure and specify null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis, and we choose alpha. Third step would be solve, collect data with simple random sample. We plot data, compute x bar and s as estimates of mu and sigma. Check conditions, SRS, and if n is less than 40. Single peaked, no outliers. So we will calculate test statistics T, that would be equal to the formula we earlier have seen. We will put all the values in this, and the degree of freedom is n minus 1. And then we will get the p-value using t-table. We can also, because t-table has limited numbers, so we cannot get particular value, p-value. So for that we can also use statistical softwares. And last is conclusion. So interpret conclusions in context. So if p-value is less than or equal to alpha, we reject null hypothesis and conclude alternate is correct. Declare results are statistically significant. And if p-value is greater than alpha, we fail to reject null hypothesis and insufficient evidence to conclude alternate is correct. And we declare results are not statistically significant. So in practice, no population distribution is exactly normal. So thus no t procedure has an exact t distribution. So here we can see that for the exact normal distribution, it's blue bell curve we can see, and this is the true population distribution. We are getting the values and we can see it's not that normal. And in reality, when we collect data and see its distribution, it's not always we get normal distribution. So how are t procedures affected by not having a simple random sample? So the confidence level and p-values are off, but we don't know how much nor in what direction. And how are t procedures affected by the lack of normality? So confidence levels and p-values are approximately correct provided data are not strongly skewed and have no outliers. So we will understand these points in later slides too. So now it's matched pairs t procedure, and comparative studies are more convincing than single sample investigations, and for that reason one sample inference is less common than comparative inference. So study designs that involve making two observations on the same individuals or one observation in each of two similar individuals result in paired data. We already have learned about the paired data in chapter 3. So you might have an idea regarding this. So when paired data result from measuring the same quantitative variable twice, as in the job satisfaction study, we can make comparison by analyzing the differences in each pair. And if the conditions for inference are met, we can use one sample t procedures to perform inference about the mean difference, that is mu d. And matched pairs t procedures to compare the responses to the two treatments in a matched pair design, find the difference between the responses within each pair, then apply the one sample t procedure to these differences. We will also understand it by an example, but first we see more about matched pairs. So here I got this from the book, and it's saying that one common comparative design, however, makes use of single sample procedures. In a matched pair studies, subjects are matched in pairs and their outcomes are compared within each matched pair. For example, an experiment to compare two smartphone packages might use pair of subjects who are of the same age, sex, and income level, and the experimenter could toss a coin to assign the two packages to the two subjects in each pair. And the idea is the matched subjects are more similar than unmatched subjects. So comparing outcomes within each pair is more efficient. That is a smaller standard deviation, that is sigma. So matched pairs are also common when randomization is not possible. But for in chapter 3, we already have seen if we are taking the matched pairs for the study, how we do randomization. It's not the case that we just avoid randomization at all, but what we did in chapter 3, just revise it before proceeding in these examples. So for example, one situation calling for matched pair is when observations are taken on the same subjects under two different conditions, or before and after of some intervention. So that is similar, like we have the same subject, patient, and we have to get the observations before meal, after meal, or before exercise, after exercise, something like that. So here is the example, and this is from the book. And the MeasureMind 3D multi-sensor metrology software is used by various companies to measure complex machine parts. As part of a technical review of the software, researchers at GE Healthcare discovered that unchecking one software option reduced measurement time by 10%. This time reduction would help the company's productivity, provided the option has no impact on the measurement outcome. And to investigate this, the researchers measured 51 parts using the software both with and without this option checked. The experimenter tossed a fair coin to decide which measurement with or without the option. So there is randomization because he is tossing a fair coin and to decide which measurement with or without the option to take first. So this is the randomization part. And here earlier in table 7.2 gives the measurements in microns for the first 20 parts, and for analysis we subtract the measurement with the option on from the measurement with the option off. These differences form a single sample and appear in the diff columns for each part. So here is the table. Here are the part and option on and option off values, and here is the difference. And to assess whether there is a difference between the measurement with and without this option, we test. So now we understand what's the problem we are going to solve. So first we are going to state our null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. So it's saying that mu is equal to 0 and mu is not equal to 0. So we learned that it is not equal to 0. So it is two-tailed test. And here mu is the mean difference for the entire population of parts. And the null hypothesis says that there is no difference. Whereas alternate hypothesis says that there is a difference. Either it could be in any direction, but doesn't specify a direction. The 51 differences have mean 0.0504 and standard deviation, that is 0.6943. So first we plot this. So figure 7.9 shows a histogram of the differences. It is reasonably symmetric with no outlier, so we can comfortably use the one sample T procedures. And we remember to always check assumptions before proceeding with statistical inference. So here's the example, and we can see particularly it is very much normal. Though I just want to mention here, because here we are just learning about the hypothesis and we are just plotting data, but particularly if you are going to check for the normality, just seeing by graph is not only one option, because this is sometimes is not that good, and we have different other options like QQ plot and other options that you will learn in other courses. So the one sample T statistics is we will keep all the values we got, and we get the value 0.52, and we had degree of freedom. There were 51 values, so 51 minus 1, that is 50, and it is lying here 0.679, and upper tail probability is 0.25. So the p-value is found from T50 distribution. Remember that the degree of freedom are 1 less than the sample size. So table T shows 0.52 lies to the left of the first column entry. This means the p-value is greater than 0.50. Software gives the exact value, and that is 0.6054. There is a little evidence to suggest this option has an impact on the measurements. When reporting results, it is usual to omit the details of routine statistical procedures, and our test would be reported in the form the difference in measurements was not statistically significant. That is T is equal to 0.52, degree of freedom 50, and probability is equal to 0.61. So the definition of robust, generally in English robust means strong, and when we are talking about in statistics, a statistical procedure that is with confidence interval or significance test is robust if confidence level or p-values does not change very much when conditions of procedures are not met. So we can take an example like we can say if a child is robust if he doesn't get viral infection or different infection, so we'll say it's is robust child. So similarly we can say that for the statistical procedure, we will see for a particular example for T procedures if they are robust or not. And first is the example for the lack of SRS, that is randomization. So for this particular reason, we will say it is never robust T procedure. So method of data collection for use of probability selection, ask and data be regarded as an SRS. So generally, if there is no randomization, results can be biased as we learned earlier, and they are unreliable even if you are getting the good results. Second condition is lack of normality. So yes, it is T procedures are robust, but only if data are not strongly skewed and have no outliers. So for check, you have to plot data, look for reasonable symmetry and single peak appearance, and look out for strong skewness and outliers. Then sample size less than 40, okay to use T procedures unless outliers or strong skewness are present. And sample size at least 40, okay to use T procedures even when data are clearly skewed due to CLT. That is central limit theorem we learned earlier. So except in the case of small samples, the condition that the data are an SRS from the population of interest is more important than the condition that the population distribution is normal. So earlier we have seen in earlier slide about regarding the randomization and normality. So now it's saying if sample size is at least 15, the T procedures can be used except in the presence of outliers or strong skewness. And if it is less than 15, use T procedures if the data appear close to normal. And if the data are clearly skewed or if outliers are present, do not use T. And for the large samples, the T procedure can be used even for clearly skewed distribution when the sample is large, roughly n is greater than or equal to 40. And that is because of CLT.